This tutorial I'll show you how to import a sprite into UE4 and use the flipbook system to animate a character of your choice using 2D. So first of all I'm going to launch the Unreal Engine using 4.11 on this one, and while that's launching I'll just flick over to Photoshop and tell you about the sprite. So I've borrowed a sprite from a well-known video game. This is the character Axel from Streets of Rage. I've laid a few of the sprites out. This is a subset of what's in the original arcade version, but as you can see I've extracted some of those sprites. They've been slightly rescaled just to make them work for this this example, but there's a set of walking animations for the first few. There's a little jump sequence, it's only one frame. There's a kick sequence which I'll come to in a second tutorial, and then there's an idle cycle, which are these last 3 frames. Now I've laid them out in a grid, and the grid size is 256 by 256. So the overall image size is set to 1024 by 1024 at 72 dpi, and UE4 recommends that you stick to basically a square image in an aspect ratio that's friendly for graphics cards, so powers of 2, so you'd get 512, 1024 and so on. Those kind of typical numbers you see often with games and things, so it's more efficient to work in this size. So choose a dimension for your image. This is the one I've gone for. And once you've set up your sprites and got them all ready, you need to turn on the grid and set the grid size. So under preferences in Photoshop, if you just go to the grid size setting there, you'll see I've set it to grid line every 256 lines, every 256 pixels. Subdivisions are set to 4 as well, just to give you a bit more guidance. So once you set that, you can turn on your grid via the view option. So go to view and show grids, which is there, and as you can see the grid layout is visible. I'll just zoom in a little bit. You can see it's fairly badly scaled up, but that's just because I was using some quite old sprites, so your own images obviously would need to be kind of higher resolution, higher quality, but this works for the demo. It's well worth studying the old sprites from some of the older video games, because they're so well kind of thought through, so well put together, and they use kind of minimal frames really because of the limited resources of the hardware at the time, so you can get some good ideas about how to put together effective walk cycles just by looking at some of these old sprites. So once you've all set that up, you've got your character aligned and everything. You'll notice on this example there's a lot of white space at the top. That's because some of the other sprites where he does like an uppercut move, his arm goes up in the air, so you need to kind of make space for if your character's kind of moving across the defined sort of sprite area. So for example here you can see the leg sticks right out almost to the edge of the sprite box, so you've got to give him enough space at the top as well, otherwise it kind of won't work quite as well. So once you've got your sprite set up, you need to export in a format that UE4 is happy with. So you can go to Save As and choose PNG. I've got mine on a transparent background as well, so it will work properly when you import them. Now I've already exported this once before, so that you can see the Axel 1 PNG file is essentially what I'll be importing into UE4. So I won't save mine, but on yours obviously you would do. So let's go back to the Unreal Engine. Now it's launched and I'm going to create a new project. So obviously choose your file path. We're going to go with a template that is the 2D side scroller. So this is basically a 2-dimensional game. You can include 3D assets within these 2D side scrollers as well, but in this case I'm just going to stick with the default. No starter content, and I'm going to give it a project name call it Axle Demo. No starter content because it'll just save you a few gigs of hard drive space, because you don't need all the built-in assets for this. Once you've done that, click Create Project. And there we are, we can see that we've got the default project set up, and we can walk around using the blue UE4 man. He's got a jump in there, and he kind of runs along. So we want to change this, so we're basically going to swap what's currently this blue UE4 man with our Axle sprite. So first thing we need to do is find out where the actual images and things for this are stored. So if you just click the little tab here, you'll see there's a folder within the content folder called 2D Side Scroller, and in here there's a folder called Textures. Now they've kind of organised their things into textures. They've got the sprites where the animation cycle is and the frames and so on. So at the end you could probably tidy up your project files like they've done, just for sort of speed and so it's more obvious where things are being saved to. I'm just going to put everything into this textures folder to start with. Okay, so first thing we want to do is import our Axle sprite sheet. So there's the sprite sheet that I showed you a moment ago. So we import that. If you double click on it, you can see that it's come in. We've got background transparent, and it all looks okay. So it's worth checking that it's fine. If you need to update the image, for example, if you had more sprites in these blank areas, or you want to change the images and so on, you just save it out as a PNG file again. Hit the re-import button. It'll re-import the texture and replace whatever's in your level currently with the new texture. So it's quite a quick and efficient way of doing that. You do have a few options for adjusting the brightness and so on if you did need to, and also if you weren't using an alpha channel, you could use a chroma key color instead. So magenta was typically used in some of the old video games as the transparent color for those games. Because we've used a square image, we don't need to do any padding. This is something that Unreal recommend that you would do if it's going to be published, but we've done ours to the correct sizes from the start. So that's all okay. So once you've imported your texture and it all looks okay, you want to right click and choose Sprite Actions, and there's an option called Extract Sprites. So click on that, and by default it will do this. It will automatically work out where all your sprites are in that sheet. Now this is kind of good in some ways because it means you can make really efficient use of your bitmap images to stick loads of sprites in. But as you can see, I've got lots of blank spaces in there. But it does make it slightly trickier to position them all and get them all aligned correctly. So just for ease and quickness, we're going to go into grid mode instead. And remember, we set our grid in Photoshop. We mapped everything out, so it was 256 by 256 in terms of the grid placement. And you can see there that if we put that into the cell width and the cell height, it will map them out accordingly. Everything else can be left as default. If you click Extract, you'll see that it's now extracted all these sprites into the content browser. There's a few blank ones at the end because we didn't have any images in there, so you can just select those and hit delete to get rid of them. Saves a bit of space. And you can see the sprites are all here. So the first 5 images here are our walk cycle, so I'm just going to select all 5 of them and then right click, and there's an option here called Create Flipbook. Now Flipbook is basically, imagine an old-fashioned kind of animation flipbook where you flip through the pages. That's essentially the metaphor they're using here. So right click, choose Create Flipbook, and it creates a new asset in the content browser, and we're going to call that Axle_walk because it's our walk cycle, and you can see straight away it started to animate a little walk cycle on there. We've got one here which is the jump cycle. This is only a single frame, so we'll just select that one single frame and call it axle underscore jump. There's this kick movement as well, which we'll make now, but we'll come back to that in a subsequent tutorial. So we create flipbook and call it axle underscore kick. And then finally there's the idle cycle, which are the last 3 frames that we imported here. So right click on those, create flipbook and axle underscore idle. Okay, so we've got 4 little animation sequences, our flipbooks at the end, and they're based upon these sprites here. Now let's just have a look inside one of the sprites and see what we've got. So you can see that by default the alignment point, the pivot essentially is registered what looks like his shoulder here, but actually it's the center of the image. If you remember, our image was 256 by 256 with the blank bit of space at the top. If you just go onto source region, you'll see how that sort of blank space is there at the top of there. So you can see that the pivot would be roughly would be exactly, I suppose, in the middle of that image. Now, if for some reason you wanted to change that, you could maybe choose it to bottom center. That might be quite handy sometimes. Or you can, of course, customize it or set it to any other option that you want. So you can kind of shift him around as needed. But for this one, we're just going to align him center and leave it as that. And that'll be the same for all the other sprites in there. If you do find that when you import your sprites there's a little bit of kind of wobbling around because they're not quite perfect in Photoshop, you could just go into the sprite editor there and just alter that little bit, just kind of tweak and adjust it using the custom option. You've got the option to edit the collision. Now we're not going to do collision detection in this example, but for example if you did want to change it, by default it's set to type bounding box. You could have it so that it's set to source bounding box, which in this case wouldn't really make sense because you'd be bumping into thin air most of the time. And the other handy one might be shrink wrapped. So this kind of finds the closest sort of edges, a bit more precise perhaps. But for this one, we'll leave it as the bounding box option. The final little section on here that's worth noting is one that's called the render geometry. Now you might need to adjust this. For example, if you altered your sprite and did a re-import of the image, and you found that the new image was slightly larger, you'd find that this bounding box might crop the edge off slightly. So you might have to adjust it. And the way you adjust this is you click on the box, you use the scale tool as you would with 3D object, and you can make this box bigger or smaller, and you'll see that as I make it smaller and let go of the mouse, you can see that it's kind of cropped some of the image off. So you'll just need to adjust that sometimes just to kind of get the full image showing. So I'll put it back to how it was. There we are. Okay, so one other point I suppose that might be handy to know is that if you've got a collision box and you want to add extra shapes to that, you can sort of add circles and other objects to kind of improve the collision if you need to. Okay, so back to our game here. So at the moment we've got the default UE4 man. Now it's pretty easy to swap him over to show Axel. So if you click on it on the editor, and you'll see here source flipbook, we can just choose Axel idle, and we'll see him kind of jiggling around there. He's a little bit quick and he's aligned to the wrong place. So we could fix the alignment by going in and editing each sprite and moving them up a bit, or the other quick way is just to edit the blueprint of this character, this player character, and go to the viewport, and you'll see that if we just change the default animation in here to the idle cycle, there he is again. We could just move the whole thing up a little bit. Now you might need to just change the snapping setting, just so that you can get his feet to be right at the bottom of the collision capsule there. So something along those lines should do it. So if we just save that, we'll see now that he sits on the floor quite nicely. Now he's too quick at the minute, so we need to change the speed at which the animation is playing back. So if we find the idle cycle in the content browser, very quick way of changing this is just to adjust the frames per second on here. So at the moment it's 15 frames a second, but if we would change that maybe to 5 frames a second, so a third of the speed, it's a little more natural, I suppose. So that's one way of quickly changing the speed of the animation. There he is. Now we've got the same issue with perhaps the walk cycle. If we have a look at this, he's running a little bit quickly, so we could again just change the whole thing to be 5 frames a second. That's probably not too bad. Now those examples were just showing how to change all the frame rates for all of the cells within that animation. Now the kick one's slightly different because first of all he's going quite quickly, but the other thing that you'll see if we just slow him down like so is that his leg actually doesn't kind of rotate back to the start position, it just snaps straight back. And we can see this if we use this tool at the bottom here, this little timeline. You just press pause there, and this red bar to kind of scrub through each cell. You'll see that frame 0, his leg kind of goes up to his chest, the leg comes out, and then it goes up one more frame. Then after that it loops back around straight to frame 0 again. So you're kind of missing the leg heading back down. So what you've got on here is the actual frames themselves. So in this case we've got 4 frames, frame 0, 1, 2 and 3. And what we might want to do is make the movement of his leg going up just a little slower to start with, and then as his leg extends it'll snap out just for a frame and then come back down again nice and kind of gracefully. So first of all, let's add in the extra frames. So we're basically going to reverse the sequence. So we've got to frame 3, so we need to add 3 more frames as the leg goes back down again, and we're just going to replicate. So we're going to go from 8, 7 down to 6. So little add button here, so we're going to add 3 new frames, and then we're going to select each frame in this list. So frame number 4 is now going to use sprite number 8. We can just check this on here to make sure it works. That's it. Frame number 5 is going to use sprite number 7. Frame number 6 we'll use sprite number 6. So you can see his leg goes up, it extends, comes back down again, back to its starting point, much more smoothly than it was before. There you are. But we might want to kind of make it a little bit snappier. It's a little bit slow, so we perhaps want to increase our frame rate back up to say 15 frames a second. Now it's going to look perhaps a little bit too quick now, so we're just going to adjust the length of each one of these frames in the lead up to the kick, but perhaps just leave the kick, which is frame number 3 here, just to be 1 frame long. So there's the option here called run frames, frame run, sorry. So the first frame, rather than just lasting for 1, we're going to make that last for 3. The second one, let's try that for 2. Third one, that's going to last for 1 single frame. So now you can see that this first image just now lasts a total of 3 animation frames, that's 2, that's 1. And then we're just going to do the same for the remaining frames. So frame number 3, that's going to be 2 frames long. Maybe actually let's leave that as 1 frame, like so. And that's going to be 1 frame. That can be 2 frames. That can be 3 frames. So you see that it starts off slower. The leg extends more quickly and then comes back down more slowly again. Let's see what the animation looks like. Yeah, it's not too bad. It might be that we want to make these 2 frames long as well, just so you can actually see the leg extending a little clearer. So you need to just adjust and change these once you're happy with the animation. Just change those back to 2 frames as well. Once you're kind of happy with the sequence and the length at which each frame lasts for, you can just hit save and close down the sprite here. So we're going to try and run it now. Now you'll notice that when we press play, it defaults back to the blue UE4 man, who's now also floating in the air slightly. Now this is because the blueprint that's actually controlling which animation sequence to play is kind of hardwired for the old blue UE4 man. So you need to edit the blueprint and have a look at the event graph. And in the event graph you'll find a section in there called handle animation, and you'll see in here are the kind of hard-coded links to which animation cycle to use. So idle we're going to change to our axle idle, and where it says running we're going to change that to our walk cycle. And then we can hit compile just to check it works, save it all, and this time we press play. We've got our axle character doing his idle cycle and doing the walk cycle. Or jump cycle yet, he just plays the walk cycle when he moves. So basically anytime the character's moving, he's going to play that walk cycle, even when he's kind of falling off ledges and things. So we need to modify the script slightly, so open the editor, and what we want to do is detect basically when we are touching the ground, or in fact if we're falling. Luckily there's a handy feature in UE4 called is falling, and it connects to something called character movement, which is this thing here. So you can see there's already one been automatically added, but character movement is a reference to part of the blueprint script that handles the actual moving around of character sprites and so on. So we've got is falling. So basically if your feet aren't on the ground, this is going to return the Boolean value of true. So we need to set up a branch. So by default on the update animation event, it's just coming on here and it's choosing whichever flipbook to play based upon whether the character has got any velocity, whether or not they're moving. So we need to add another branch, and we're going to link the condition to our is falling. So we say, is the character falling? Yes or no. And if he is falling, then we're going to show off essentially our jump animation sequence, animation flipbook. If he's not falling, then we'll go and do whatever he's doing at the moment. So we've just got to swap these over. So the false goes to here, and we'll just disconnect the true pin. So if he's not falling, then he'll pick either one of those ones. If he is falling, then we just need to set a flipbook to show something else. So we'll link a new set flipbook from here, we'll keep it all nicely organised, so if it starts to fall, or if you press the jump key, we'll play that axle jump sequence. Just link it up like so, and there's the blueprint that shows that process. Zoom in a bit so you can see it. So there we are. So on the update animation event, we're going to do a branch. If he's falling, then we're going to play the jump animation. If he's not falling, then we're going to pick either the idle or the walk cycle, depending on whether he's moving or not. Check compile, make sure it all works. Press save. Press the play button, and this time he now has a little jump as well. So you can jump. He plays that if you fall off the ledge. He also plays that same animation sequence. You can see the collision's working reasonably well. I mean, you could go in there and adjust it slightly, but he's not bad. And that's pretty much it for that one. So always remember to do a save all from this button here before you finish the project. So save selected, and just make sure you save your level as well, like so. In the next tutorial I will show you how to add the kick feature in there as well, so we'll be adding an extra bit of script to this one, but for now we'll leave it there.